Pro-Palestine protests are sweeping across university campuses. The biggest have been in the United States, but some are sprouting up in Europe too. So, what do they want? And are European leaders actually listening? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, students in the UK, France and elsewhere have been occupying buildings and setting up camps. They want their views on the atrocities in Gaza taken seriously. Young people are often the drivers of change, so will these protests make any impact?
Free Palestine!
These tents are an act of defiance. Students at University College London are standing up for what they believe in. Not only do they want Gazans to know they are supported, but they want concrete action from the university.
That is for them to divest from any companies which are complicit in the ongoing genocide going on in Gaza, to condemn those war crimes, and for them to pledge for the reconstruction of the universities in Gaza, all of which have been destroyed.
In Copenhagen, demonstrators are calling for the same action. They feel that the movement is gaining momentum. In France, dozens of students occupied spaces at the Sciences Po building in Paris. After a few days, they were cleared out by police, as were encampments at the Sorbonne. The most ardent activists are continuing the pressure with hunger strikes.
More and more people are joining in on campuses in Paris and the regions. In other universities, people are going to start hunger strikes too, and we won't stop until investigative committees are set up to ensure that university partnerships with the State of Israel, with Israeli universities, are cut off.
Over the weekend, the UCL campus became a flashpoint for pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli protesters. More camps are also appearing on campuses around the UK. So what will the universities do, and how long are students prepared to protest?
Let's meet our guests. Joining us from Paris is Lara Elborno. She's a Palestinian-American international lawyer and activist with roots in Gaza. Also in Paris is Nacira Guenif. She's a professor of sociology and anthropology at the Paris 8 University. Brendan Ciaran Browne is an assistant professor in the School of Religion at Trinity College Dublin. He joins us from Belfast. And here with me in the studio is Amna Ghaffar, representative for University College London, Action for Palestine. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. I'll come to you first, Lara. I think one of the most powerful banners I've seen in the protests simply said, "No universities left in Gaza." That's the terrible truth, isn't it?
That's correct. I mean, Israel has destroyed all 12 universities in Gaza in the last 7 months. And although that alone is inconceivable, it's actually only a fraction of the horror that the Palestinian people in Gaza have been facing for the last 7 months. Just in the last month alone, there were mass graves that were discovered at Al-Shifa Hospital after it was completely destroyed by the Israeli occupation forces, and also at Nasser Hospital. And since yesterday, 76% of the Palestinian population in Gaza was told to evacuate by Israel so that Israel could intensify its bombardment of Rafah, where most Palestinians have been forcibly displaced, living in tents since October. And yet, of course, we know that there is nowhere to go because Israel has destroyed the majority of the homes and buildings in Gaza. And people on the ground are simply terrified. They have been displaced multiple times, attacked in their homes and in every single place where they have sought refuge. At this point, we're seeing Israel press on with its invasion and incursion into Rafah. And we've seen Israeli soldiers publish videos of themselves bulldozing parts of the Rafah crossing, which we know is the only way for Palestinians out of Gaza. And so students are rightly angry, and they have participated in these encampments as a means to express their emotions.
Nacira, talk us through the strength of feeling on campuses in France.
Actually, I think that one should begin by reminding the viewers that in France, the first demonstrations and rallies were forbidden from taking place. This happened during a month in October. And so when the rallies and demonstrations started to express solidarity and concern about what was happening in Gaza and Palestine, some sort of harm towards the expression, the public expression, the freedom of expression, the solidarity, and even academic expression of solidarity or academic freedom was impeached. And it was in many ways difficult to express and to make it public. So it is under this guise and the backdrop of rising far right in France that all demonstrations pro-Palestinians and pro-Palestine have been demonized, have been criminalized. And this is also happening on French campuses where meetings are being canceled, public expressions are being bullied, and sometimes even equated with anti-Semitism. So this is how things are unfolding. And as I speak to you, I came back a few minutes ago from a meeting at Sciences Po Paris, in the heart of Paris and close to the ministries and all kind of official buildings. And there has been, again, the police trying to disband and to bully the students that were standing with all eyes on Rafah. Of course, this is the main issue right now. So this is how it is unfolding. So it's not very powerful. There are many campuses where students are growingly meeting and trying to address many questions, not just the ceasefire, but also what will come up next, and not just because it's very important, the destruction of all higher education in Gaza and even in the West Bank. So they are increasingly meeting, but they are facing a very harsh retaliation from the state, from the police, from the French, not only president, but also the prime minister, who are criminalizing the students and saying that they should not sit on the streets, they should not call for the ceasefire. And maybe the ceasefire is okay, but the fact that they would call what's happening in Gaza a genocide is something that is being criminalized, since there has been political deputies, as you know, personnel who are accused of apology of terrorism in France, and they are being tried for this.
Let's bring in Brendan. I noticed, Brendan, this week in Ireland, huge support as ever for the Palestinian cause, but at Trinity College Dublin, I noticed that the Students' Union has just been fined €214,000 for having protests, which the university say is disrupting people coming in. What's been the feeling about that? Is that an attempt to shut the students up, do you think?
Well, by way of a background, yes, the Trinity College Dublin, the students have taken over a part of the quad there in the centre of Trinity. Anybody that's been will know there's a grassy area, and students have erected their solidarity camp for this, based on the demands that we have seen coming from other solidarity camps in America and those in Europe as well. So the Students' Union have been very active, and Trinity College Dublin BDS have been very active, and alongside an organisation called PWO, the Postgraduate Workers Organisation as well. So it's a growing camp. The camp is still there. It's been there for the past 4 days, and actually last night there was a very strong, a very public message that came out of Trinity College Dublin, looking at the demands that were being requested by the students and attending to some of them. It was quite extraordinary actually, and good to see the university responding to some of the legitimate demands that were being put forward. Now, with regard to the fine that you mentioned, it would be wrong, in fact, to say that that is a fine against protesting specifically against the situation with regard to Trinity's links with Israeli institutions. That is perhaps, there's more to it than that. And again, I'm not a spokesperson for Trinity, so I can't go into that in too much detail. So it remains to be seen what way that fine is either imposed or in fact rescinded. And I actually suspect that there will be some more movement on that in the next few days. But Trinity is the first university in Ireland to have this camp. It remains to be seen. There's talk of some of the other student unions in Ireland taking these steps as well. I know the university in Galway has been very proactive, and indeed so has their vice-chancellor in saying that they will begin as a university community to look at ties with Israeli institutions. So this is an important moment. It feels like we're on the cusp of something quite significant, and all power to the students. I hope they are successful.
Amna, just give us your impression of student life in London at the moment. How much anger is there about what's happening in Gaza, and how much support are the students receiving? I mean, compared to France, you've been able to protest.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of anger. There is a lot of anger for what's happening, and there's a lot of anger specifically to our academic institutions that are directly complicit in Israel's genocide of Gaza. I think the energy in all the protests, it's empowering, it's inspiring, but at the same time, it's incredibly heartbreaking because of the reason that we're protesting. We're protesting for the self-determination and liberation of a people who have overwhelmingly become refugees since Israel's ethnic cleansing began during the Nakba of 1948. So we have been able to protest, and we will continue protesting, but the pushback from management and the repression that we've been seeing on campuses is also increasing as the anger increases and as the protests continue.
Just tell me, we've seen words and rhetoric from the Conservative government in the UK calling the marches hate marches. What do you make of how protesters are being viewed by the ruling class in the UK?
Well, I think it's all part of a much bigger campaign of repression against pro-Palestinian solidarity. And it's really unfortunate because it all seems like a distraction from the real issue at hand. And I think in all the protesting and student organising that we do at UCL and that students are doing globally now, the main message that we really want to reiterate is that we are organising in order to centre Palestinians and to uplift their voices and to make explicitly clear the suffering that Palestinians and Gazans are facing at the hands of Israeli occupation, colonisation and genocide.
Well, we've seen pro-Palestine student protests in the UK, France, in Copenhagen, in Denmark, protests also in other European cities. 300 students at the Barcelona University set up a protest camp, while the University of Valencia had over 8 days of encampment. At the University of Amsterdam, hundreds of students also set up camp. That has since been broken up by police. And in Belgium, at the University of Ghent, about 100 students occupied part of the university. Lara, what kind of global message does this send when we see students raising their voices and speaking out in support of the people of Gaza? Can they actually make any difference?
I believe they can make a difference. I mean, we know that in order to change policy, you need to build power as a part of a social justice movement, a freedom movement, liberation movement, and these students are part of that power building. They're getting together in communities. I mean, in Colombia alone, the encampment was set up from 116 student groups across 9 different Columbia schools, which have all signed on the call to divest from Israel. They're representative of their student bodies. They're an incredibly diverse group of students, and they're really sending a very strong message, not only to their institutions, but to their governments, which are complicit in this genocide, and saying to them that no, we are going to do something about this. And they have succeeded in disrupting. And let's remind that that is exactly what the intention of protest is. Protest is intended to be disruptive. By definition, sit-ins are a form of nonviolent civil disobedience where protesters sit someplace until their grievances are met or until they're forcibly removed. And this tactic is not new. And in every single liberation movement, which is looked back on fondly today, like the struggle for civil rights in the US or the anti-Vietnam War struggle or the anti-apartheid struggle, protests broke the law in this very way. So students utilizing this are now utilizing this tactic because they have been actually for years organizing around this issue, and they've seen no advancement, and they've seen that their institutions continue to be complicit in the oppression of the Palestinian people. And they've seen that their government policy is completely bending over backwards to ensure that Israel has an uninterrupted supply of weapons, diplomatic protection on the international scale, all of the financing that it needs to carry out this genocide. And they know that the stakes are incredibly high. And that's why they have escalated their methods of protest. And ultimately, it's going to be on the universities to decide whether they want to negotiate in good faith and reassess their investments and their complicity in this oppression. But the students have tremendous power. And to any students who are listening to this, don't be discouraged. And I believe that we will continue to see more and more encampments globally spread. The worse the situation continues to get on the ground, and it is deteriorating every single second for Palestinians in Gaza and across all of occupied Palestine. And the more that the universities and the governments refuse to reassess their positions, the students will just become more and more empowered.
Nacira, do you think with the Olympics and the Paralympics coming to Paris in a very short amount of time now, do you think French politicians and police and security officials are very worried about, the protests gaining momentum across the French capital?
Well, obviously, everybody wishes that we won't have to go on with this kind of uprising until the Olympics late July. That would be terrible news for the Gazawi and the Palestinians on the ground. But this is something that everybody has in mind. It's not just about what might happen in July. It's the way the world is looking at Paris right now, which is a place, as we have seen on different networks, where demonstrations are taking place, where students are building encampments on the street. I mean, the tents in front of Sciences Po are on the street. They are not inside. And so the police is everywhere all the time. And so, yes, of course, they are trying to avoid the message to be spread out on international networks and through social media. But this has already happened. People in Gaza know about the fact that France is also a place where protesters and solidarity is being expressed. So, and there is also the European Union elections on June 9. Which is supposed to be a moment where, when the Palestinian question is not viewed as part of the campaign, but actually is becoming central to the campaign. So on many different grounds, there is something that the French government is worried about, righteously, because the movement is growing and is becoming powerful and vocal. A lot of networks are following now what's happening in different universities.
Well, Brendan, student protests are nothing new. If we look back in history, in 1960, 4 black students from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College walked up to a segregated lunch counter in Greensboro and refused to leave. And this was among the first sit-in protests of the US civil rights movement. In the 60s and 70s, thousands protested against the Vietnam War. In 1976, students in Soweto in South Africa protested against the government's plans to impose the Afrikaans language in schools for black students, and that effectively set in motion the global movement against South Africa's apartheid. And then in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement fighting racism and police brutality was supported by thousands of students across the world, from the US, the UK, France, all the way to Australia. Tell me, Brendan, what's your feeling about where these current protests could lead historically? How will we remember them?
Well, yeah, and all of what you've said there makes a mockery of anybody that says students don't understand the power of their movement or they don't understand their history. Students are very aware of the successes of the past student movements that you referenced, and they know that these tactics are a crucial way of reclaiming their agency in this space and pushing back against these institutions, as the other panelists have said, who are complicit by engaging in supporting Israeli companies and failing to divest when that's what they've been asked to do. So I hope that we look back on at this moment and see it as the moment that really brought this catastrophe unfolding across Palestine to an end. And of course, that will also be brought to an end by the steadfastness of the Palestinian people and the resistance of the Palestinian people. So I really hope that we see these student encampments grow and continue to grow. They are obviously going to be met clearly, as it seems, with violent repression at times. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, Amsterdam was cleared overnight. I've seen some awful pictures coming out of the university in Chicago, in Berlin as well. And I think that is something that students are also very aware of. They know that these modes of resistance will also be met on occasion, and quite a lot of occasions, by violence. So they are brave and they're strong and they are determined to see this over the line. So again, more power to them and respect to them. And I really do hope that they continue to grow. And when you see some of the university administrations realizing that students aren't going anywhere, they realize they're going to have to address this. That gives us some kind of hope. So I think I hope we can look back in time that this was a moment of real change.
Amna, I just want to ask you about how Jewish students are feeling on campus. I've seen lots of commentary about them saying that they feel unsafe or they feel intimidated. What's your assessment of that?
So I'm a representative of UCL Action for Palestine, which is a group of students who have been undertaking direct action on campus since October. And we wholeheartedly reject the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And we want to always assert that we are motivated by love for the Palestinian people and by a deep commitment to universal human rights. In all the organizing we do and all the beliefs that we hold, we seek an end to any system of racist domination that claims that some lives are worth less than others. And our movement, the global movement of solidarity with the Palestinian people, welcomes any and everyone who's equally as committed to principles of equality and anti-racism. And that means Islamophobia, that means anti-Semitism, that means anything of the sort.
Lara, I'm just hearing that German police have just cleared students away from the university from a pro-Palestine encampment there. I mean, there seems to be a lot of pushback from the authorities. Why are they so scared of students protesting in support of a ceasefire?
I mean, you're asking exactly the right question. In fact, what this is exposing for us is that the students' demands are, in fact, not insane, not radical, not unusual. They're the bare minimum of what any human being with, their heart properly functioning would ask for. After seeing 7 months of live stream genocide images, it's just the bare minimum of what any human being would desire. But rather, what's abnormal here is the reaction to the students by the university administrators, by the police, by the entire media political class, which is completely distorting their messaging, which is painting them as being driven by hate, which is totally ridiculing their demands and not taking them seriously. And that really is the issue here. And I think, if you want to ask why, it all goes back to the tremendous influence of the pro-Israel lobbies in a lot of these Western countries, the US, the UK, Germany, like you just said. And that's unfortunately a reality that we have to contend with as people in civil society trying to build power to resist this massive type of oppression that is being wielded by these governments. I just want to make a final point that I think it's really disingenuous for the mainstream media to erase the presence of Jewish students, Jewish anti-Zionist students at these Gaza Solidarity encampments, especially in the United States, because we know that they're a central part of the organizing. We saw at the Columbia encampment, Shabbat Shalom, from the Columbia Gaza Solidarity encampment. Jewish anti-Zionist students are an essential part of the organizing for a free Palestine in the United States. And their participation in these encampments and their solidarity with the Palestinian people is always erased, precisely because it directly undermines the message that they're trying to send, which is that their crackdown of these protests is intended to keep Jewish students safe, when in fact the reality is exactly the opposite. They're sending the police to exercise extreme, violence and police brutality against these students is what's making those Jewish anti-Zionist students safe. And that's what they have expressed time and again. But of course, their voices are nowhere to be seen in the mainstream media, precisely because it undermines the propaganda that they're trying to push forward.
Lara, Brendan and Amna, thank you all so much for your insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.